Allied health, it's been in the news quite a bit lately, particularly around the NDIS. And I have a personal experience of the difference that allied health made in one of my children's lives. And for me, the allied health specialist helped my child, but helped me to be able to help my child and help me to educate the other people in our family. And it made such a difference. And today I'd like to talk a little bit about allied health, what it is and why it makes a difference.
Absolutely. We know it makes an incredible difference and very happy to talk about that.
Wonderful. I'm Nicky Sloan. I'm the CEO of Community Industry Group, and I'm coming to you today from the beautiful lands of the Dharawal people to bring you Community Matters, the podcast that explores community solutions with people who are making a difference. And today I'm joined by the wonderful Alice Lands, who is CEO of NOAA's Inclusion Services. Alice is herself a speech pathologist and as part of her organisation has a whole team of people delivering services, including allied health specialists. Welcome, Alice.
Thanks very much, Nicky. Thanks for having me today.
So, Alice, if we can just start out, because I think we talk a lot about allied health, but perhaps there's an assumed knowledge about what allied health is or isn't. So could you unpack that term for listeners?
Sure, absolutely. So there's a very wide range of professionals that would fall into the allied health category. Generally, it's a term that's used for professionals who have particular skills in a particular part of human function. And what their role is that they will break down skills, often that a lot of us take for granted that we can do, and a lot of function that we take for granted. They'll break down the skills that are required for that and work on those. So people that fall into an allied health category would be people like a speech pathologist, as you mentioned, and fantastic that you've seen the experience of having that early intervention and what that outcomes that's led to. Occupational therapists, physiotherapists, dietitians, podiatrists, social workers. So there's a really wide range of allied health professionals and also psychologists. So in that range of professionals, obviously it can take various forms, but the critical thing is that those allied health professionals will work, as I said, across a range of human function and skills, but they will also work across the lifespan. And that's a really important thing to consider, because depending on the areas of specialty in the function of that profession, it will be different depending on who they're working with and what context they're working with those people in. But certainly, critical to our function as human society, and particularly critical to early childhood development.
You mentioned there about early intervention, and I think early intervention means two things, doesn't it, really? It can be early in life, or it could be early in the development of an issue.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I mean, one of the things we talk about early intervention, it's a term that's been around, it's used in lots of contexts. I have also heard, I know intervention is a word that we sometimes don't like using. We think maybe we should call it early investment, because that's another thing that we look at doing.
Right,
so,
yes.
Really, I think that it's about just supporting early. And I know Andrew Whitehouse recently was talking about this area and talking about really we want for children, we want supports at the right place, the right time and the right support. So allied health professionals are really well placed to do that. And at NOAA's, we are very fortunate that we not only have a team of allied health professionals, but also we have other professionals like early childhood educators and teachers, and we have family support workers who work together in very much in a collaborative team, which is really fantastic because it allows us to really have that cross-discipline knowledge. And our allied health professionals certainly have a specialty in early childhood development. So obviously if we're talking about allied health professionals who work with adults or in aged care or with older teenagers or young adults, people who've had car accidents, people who have illness or injury, people who have other functional challenges, then they will have their own specialty areas that they have done further training and qualifications in. And for our staff, that is usually around early childhood development and working very closely in partnership with parents.
That's interesting. I think you've raised some really important issues there. One is the importance of those early childhood professionals they are often the people who will be able to identify really early that your child would benefit from some allied health.
And I think that for a lot of families, that can be a really challenging, concerning time when families are feeling like there might be some area of their child's development that's not quite where they think it should be or would like it to be. Often that can be early childhood education and care services and schools that can identify that too. So one of the challenges that we can have is when there's a really limited access to that at the right time when families need it. And we think that's really important.
And you also talked about partnership with parents and with families, and I know that's one of the things that I learned through my experience was I learned a different way of teaching, and I learned it through play, and I learned so much from that experience. How important is the broader support network around someone when it comes to allied health?
Oh, it's absolutely critical. I'm really glad that you raised that. And as you explained in your own example, a parent learning and being upskilled and supported to understand what the allied health professional is doing is really, really critical to the outcomes for that child and for that family. And because we work with children, many children who have a disability, then a lot of those families really want to know as much as they can about how to support their child. And at the end of the day, a therapy session may be one therapy session in a week. That is a very small amount of time for someone to be with a child and to make a difference. So really that therapy session is only going to have a certain amount of impact. What is going to make the impact is the rest of the 23 and a half or 23 hours that child is spending every day, 7 days a week with that family. And that is going to be the time where those skills are going to be practiced. And if the parents understand not only the goals of the therapy, but also the why of the therapist is doing certain activities, encouraging certain routines, making certain changes to the environment, giving opportunities for practice within that child's routine, particularly within anyone's routine, that's what makes the difference. So the parent partnership is critical. I guess when we talked about allied health, and I said, they often can be specialist in a particular area of development or muscle function or skill, whereas the parent is the specialist in their child. So really the partnership there between we need each other. We need the families to be working with to understand that child better, and the families really want to know how they can support their child. So really for us as an organisation, I would see it more as a coaching model of supporting parents using what the expertise is of the allied health professional in conjunction with the expertise of the parent, which is their child or their child's routine.
I think that's a lovely way to think about it, allied health professionals as coaches, because I know you're talking about it in the early childhood area, but even when we think about in older people and the difference speech pathology can make in swallowing and preventing choking in older people. But it's not enough just to teach the older person,
Absolutely.
You need to make sure if they're in residential care that all of the people around them understand it, that their family understand it as well.
Absolutely. So again, great point. And it doesn't ever happen in isolation. We don't operate in isolation. We operate in the context that we're living and working and playing in. So a good example, as you said, an older person who wants to have a cup of tea, who maybe has some swallowing challenges after a stroke, that the people around that person need to understand how that person can be supported where they're living. So in that instance, you would want a speech pathologist, if they need a modification to their food or drink, that needs to be understood by the people who are providing the food and drink to the person. Same as for children, it's the same in early childhood education and care services. If a child is learning keyword sign or is having some mobility challenges around the service, then there is no point in those instances of that being in isolation in a clinic room outside of that space where the people around the child aren't being educated and upskilled in that, where a family needs to learn keyword sign because they're the ones with the child. If a child is trying to learn to request food with that keyword sign, then you want that child to be having that support when they are in situations where they have to request food. And that will typically be when they're at home with their families or in their education setting. So again, as you said, look across the lifespan. You want allied health if it's someone physio with a person with a knee replacement, or it's someone who's learning to get muscle function again after a car accident, or whatever the challenge may be. The allied health professionals really will. A huge part of their work is collaborating with others around that person, as well as other professionals that they work together with.
This is a really important point, and I know I spoke right at the start that we've heard a lot about allied health in the news with the new NDIS pricing. For our listeners, could you just explain what the changes to NDIS pricing are?
There's quite a few changes, but the ones that we're focusing on probably that have the biggest impact on allied health professionals are, one is that the price guide has said that the pricing is half for therapy travel of what it was up until 30th of June this year. So that means that a therapist who is going to see someone for their therapy session can only charge half of that travel cost that they could charge before. The second one is that there's been a reduction in the hourly rate for some allied health professionals. So those two things obviously have quite a significant impact on service delivery and on the value of those professions.
I think you're really making the point about the need for allied health professionals to be able to go to the place where the person is. If an occupational therapist needs to assess somebody's house, you can't do that from a clinic.
You can't. Absolutely can't. It's very difficult to make a home modification if you're not at the home. So that's a really obvious one. But, I would say that most allied health professionals will need some type of visit to some other place to be able to provide that service in the most appropriate way. And so, yes, being able to be where the participant, as I said, works, plays, spends time, learns, is very, very important.
So the changes to NDIS pricing is going to have a significant impact on allied health professionals' ability to do that.
Yes, it will. I guess the issue with that is that you don't have to be an economist to see that if you are delivering a service in that way, you have two choices, and one choice is not to deliver the service in that way, and the other choice is to continue delivering the service in that way and be paid half the amount. So neither of them are fantastic choices. I think that's the really big challenge for our sector and our professionals at the moment. It's very concerning because allied health professionals generally, they're going into this work because they want to make a difference in people's lives, and they are people who want to improve function for people, and that is very difficult to do in, as we said, without being able to go to where the people are having those challenges and spending that time. For our organisation, last year we had, I think, over 13,000 hours of travel amongst our many, many, many allied health professionals. It being in a regional area, that's obviously makes a difference as well. We have a lot of families who don't drive, who don't have access to public transport. We don't have our service set up for clinic-based service because we also know that it is not best practice in the early childhood intervention sector, that there has been decades of evidence to show that you want to provide services where children spend their time in what we call a key worker model, which uses our allied health professionals in that transdisciplinary collaborative way with other people and works with parents in partnership and early childhood educators and others that the child spends time with. And to do that in their setting is best practice. And one of the challenges at the moment for a lot of allied health professionals is that they are in an ethical and not only an ethical dilemma, but also a financial dilemma. So, there's really not a lot of opportunity to see how this will play out.
So the NDIS, when it was brought in, it was about reasonable and necessary interventions to support people with disability. And these changes to the pricing is really going to impact people's access to reasonable and necessary supports.
Absolutely. And I think the irony of that is that we would say it's reasonable to provide that service at a family's place that they need. And so I think it will absolutely have that impact. And we know there are already providers who are really struggling and talking about not providing that service just because it just doesn't make any economic sense for them. And so I think we have a real challenge as a sector. And I think what's concerning is sometimes you don't see that impact until it's too late, and in a period of time, the outcomes are going to be worse of that, but we won't see them immediately. There'll be immediate impact on families if they can't receive the services they need, but then longer term, there'll be further impacts on that won't come out until further down the track.
So you talked about early investment, and this is really going to impact early investment, and it's really against best practice. So I know this is something that the Illawarra Disability Alliance, of which Noah is of course part, is actively advocating about, and I hope our listeners can see why it's so important.
So the other thing, Nicky, that I'd say, talking about reasonable and necessary, is that I would go further than saying it's reasonable to have families receive that type of service or any NDIS participant, but I think it's actually essential because as we've just discussed, for the reasons that we've just described, it is actually just embedded in the service delivery model of most allied health professionals. So that makes it very challenging. And so if we talk about providing a service that you are getting for some of that time of that essential service, you're only being paid for half of the time, I can't understand really the economics of how that is viable for many people providing that service.
And I think economically, we hear so much about the cost of the NDIS, but the reality is we haven't seen price increases, have we, since 2019?
Since 2019, and in fact...
That's 6 years, folks.
The other very difficult thing is that you'll know that there are some allied health professional rates who've actually been cut in this latest price guide, which is another, I guess, adds a bit of insult to injury for those professionals who are highly, highly valued and again, essential. So when we look at physiotherapy, for example, there are people and children and older people who rely on physiotherapy as an essential service, that if they are not going to receive that service where they need it and when they need it, they will end up in hospital and probably worse. And really, the physiotherapy group, I know that physios are advocating very loudly about this, but it is something that we really need to acknowledge that it is, for some people, it will be a life and death situation.
We already know that our health system's stretched. We already know we've been doing so much work around bed block and people who are in hospital who do not need to be there and in fact need to be somewhere much more appropriate. It goes back to that early investment piece, doesn't it? These are investments in people's lives.
And we know that the investment in this field gains such great outcomes if it's delivered in best practice model and if it's delivered at the right time with the right level of funding, that we know that the outcomes for children, families, participants are enormous. And so we know that the return on investment for that is really significant. And so I think as the allied health community look at what's happening at the moment, it's a hard time. And trying to take what they've always done in practice and what they know is right for their professions is not really matching with the market delivery of that service.
We just recently did an episode with Karen Burdett from Greenacres, and we were talking about the significant impact on GDP if we had more people with disability employed. And I think when you think about the work of your allied health colleagues, that would really enable people to enter the workforce, or if they're not getting access to that, disinhibit their ability to enter the workforce.
Absolutely. The range of outcomes that we're talking about are very broad, very wide, as I said, depending on the lifespan and the sector that we're talking about and the profession we're talking about. We've only got a short time today, but it's a huge topic and a big area. And every profession that would come under an allied health professional role would be able to, talk for a long time about the impact and the examples of what they do and what difference they make. And I think that anyone who's experienced that firsthand, as you've described, we're full of stories of families where they've experienced that firsthand, and they talk about what a difference that makes to them and to their child and to that generation.
So is there anything that, listeners, people in the community could be doing to support the work that you do?
I think just podcasts like this are great. What you're doing with Community Industry Group and the awareness of community work. I think the community sector is very strong. They have incredible resilience, and they also, often provide, they're just a really integral part of our human services system. And I think that we really can learn a lot when I look around at the people who are working in not-for-profit organisations, community work. There's so much strength there, and there's so much to learn, and that they're usually at the cutting edge of what is needed in their field, the evidence that they base their work on, the way they manage their funding, which, as we've just discussed, is often very difficult. They really are contributing an enormous amount to the communities that we all live and work in. So I think the awareness of community sector is really important.
Hear, absolutely. So Alice, this podcast series is called Community Matters. Mm-hmm. Could you tell us about a person or people in the community that matter to you?
Yes, I can. That's a big question, because there are many, many people in the community. I think about how much inspiration we have, particularly in the Shoalhaven and Illawarra community. I think we're very fortunate that we have, you mentioned the Illawarra Disability Alliance and the people involved there. It's very important at this time, particularly, that we come together, and they really inspire me. I'm part of some early childhood intervention network best practice groups, and again, when I look at the leaders of these organisations and the way that they just keep doing what they're doing under really challenging circumstances, that really inspires me. And when I really reflect on that, I think there are many, many, many times people feel like, it's just going to walk away. It's just too hard. And they don't. They keep fighting for what they think is right. And as we talked about before, ethical and sustainable. I was using with my staff recently a term about moral ambition, and I feel like that there's a real drive that people have around doing that work. And so for me, there are many people. It's really hard to call someone out particularly. I think our staff, I would say a lot of our staff who particularly choose to work, they could work in other contexts, they could work for themselves, they choose to work for an organisation like ours, and they do that, I think, because community matters, and they really feel very strongly about that. And in line with that, also the families that we work with, how much they provide the inspiration for me and for our staff in what we're doing, because they also enjoy coming and being supported by a community organisation. And so we talk about the Noah's community as being something that is really special to us, and I think there's really like a family sense there, and I think that's something really special. So I think we're very fortunate in this region to have so many amazing community providers, and we want to keep supporting each other.
Beautiful. That's lovely. What a lovely note to end on. I think you've really told us today, I think you've given everybody a really great understanding about the importance of allied health, the importance of early investment, and that sometimes reasonable and necessary isn't enough. We need to think about things as essential, and I think when we start to think about things as essential, we start to value them differently. So thank you so much, Alice. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for tuning in to Community Matters, the podcast that discusses community solutions with people who are making a difference. Please like us, share this episode, leave us a review, and tune in next time for more Community Matters.